Our next step will be to prepare our ruffle, and the first thing we'll need to do is put our ruffle pieces so they are wrong sides facing each other. So it's right side facing you on the top piece, right side facing down towards your workspace. I'm just going to pop a couple of pins in there, and then we will do a French seam on our ruffle. So we just need to sew our two ruffle pieces together on both short ends of our ruffle at 1/4 of an inch. And don't forget to put your stay stitches in at the beginning and the end of your seam. So remove your pins and then trim that seam down to around about 1/8. And then we'll turn out, give this seam a press, and then sew along the other side. So after you've completed your French seams, the internal piece of your ruffle should have this nice sealed seam. And the next step will be to press your hem up, and we're just going to start by pressing 1/4 of an inch up, and make sure that press is facing in towards your seam there. So we'll just go ahead and press the whole way around your ruffle at 1/4 of an inch, and then repeat the step again. So another 1/4 of an inch over. So once you've pressed your hem twice, so 1/4 of an inch and then your 1/4 of an inch, just pop in some pins to help secure your pressed edge. And then we're just going to sew this seam along here. So now we'll just sew along our pressed seam. Just try and keep as close to that edge as you can. And don't forget to start off with your stay stitch. Now we've finished sewing down our hem, and the next step will be to put in our gathering stitches. So to do this step, you will need to set your sewing machine so it has the lowest tension. On my machine, my maximum is 9, but some machines will label this differently, and then you will also need to increase your stitch length to the maximum it can go to. On my machine this is 4.5. Different machines will vary, so just check your manual if you need to. And we will now put in 2 rows of gathering stitches. And it's very important with this step to put those stay stitches in, because the next step after we pin to our dress is to then pull those stitches, and if it is not anchored down it will just completely unfurl, so it's very important to put those stay stitches in. So after you've put your 2 rows of gathering stitches in, your first row should be about 1/4 of an inch down, and your second row approximately 1/8 of an inch down. Be careful not to run over either of your gathering stitches while you're doing this, otherwise it won't pull properly. My very top tip for this is, if you have a gathering or a ruffling foot, use that, because it makes these tedious jobs just a little bit quicker and easier. But if you have to do it the classical way, do it slowly, put in those 2 rows of stitching, and if you need to, as sometimes these threads can break or they can be tricky, do it in 2 lots. So put your first 2 rows between those joins in your fabric, so you will have 2 halves to pull rather than pulling the whole gather in one go. Now our next step is to pin our gathers onto our dress, and we'll do that by marking our ruffle. So we'll need to fold it in half, matching up your joins here. Find the halfway mark, pop a pin in, and you can see that my gathering stitches have already ruffled my ruffle a little bit. Find the other halfway and mark, and so it should be marked into 4 quarters. You'll have your 2 seams and then your 2 pinned points, and we'll pin that onto the dress. So we'll also mark our dress in half using our seams again. Just pop the pins in, marking halfway and marking halfway again, and then we can match up our pins. There we go. So we want to make sure our seams on our ruffles match up our seams on our dress. So we'll place the ruffle correct side down onto the correct side of the dress front, match up those pins and just pin, and then we'll continue to pin our ruffle on like so. We'll go the whole way around. So after you pinned your 4 quarters of your ruffle onto your 4 marked out edges of your dress, you'll then need to pull those long threads to gather your ruffle. Now this is a bit of a delicate process and it can take a little bit of time. Just do it gently, but after you pulled your ruffles, your ruffling threads all the way around, you'll be able to get a perfect gather right the way around the edge. As you can see, it all matches up now. And once you've completed that, we'll be able to stitch on our ruffle onto our dress. So after you've pulled your gathers to your dress and everything is nice and even, just pin those edges down, and then we're going to need to stitch them on. So I'm just going to start along one of my seams along the edge there. I'm going to stitch about 1/4 of an inch away or in between those gathering stitches. So don't forget to do your stay stitch. I'm just going to sew that on right the way round. Just be careful to move your dress around and not stitch the back and front together. The way that I've popped my pins in, I can just sew directly across and then pull all the pins out later. The next task will be just to remove our gathering threads and just trim down that seam allowance before we finish it off with a bit of bias binding.